The situation in Syria has gone from bad to worse since the start of the war in 2011. But recently, things have started to turn around. President Trump ended funding for anti-government rebels in 2017 and has announced that he's working on pulling U.S. troops out of the conflict. President Assad's forces are making major gains across the country, recapturing the entire capital of Damascus, while the Islamic State has lost nearly all of its territory. In Aleppo, since the Western-backed rebels were defeated, Christians have finally been able to celebrate Christmas for the first time in 7 years, and residents are flocking to the streets to praise President Assad and his army for liberating them from the terrorist fighters. But despite these wins, people in the West, in countries like Britain and France, and even politicians in Washington are still calling for President Assad's head, saying that the U.S. must support moderate rebels, the White Helmets, and protect the people of Syria from Assad's brutal dictatorship, even though that's the exact opposite of what the people in Syria say they want. I traveled to Syria to investigate these claims, and so has Carla Ortiz, a Bolivian-American filmmaker and activist who's been on the ground in war zones across Syria. I spoke with Carla to find out what the people of Syria actually think. So a lot of Americans want to know why would our government lie to us? Why would they make these stories up if it's not the truth? Why should we believe these random people instead of our own government?
Because they've lied about Libya and Iraq and Afghanistan. Why should we believe them? Why should we not question them? We pay taxes, and where is this money going to? So I think that why Americans should question, because it matters to us. It is our money which is funding these wars. It is our taxes money that could go into education and into health that is going on to killing innocent people in Syria. And it did in Iraq, and it did it again and again. So we need to question not just our governments, we need to question our corporations, we need to question our mainstream media.
You know, you've got a lot of experience, you've been over there a lot of times. In your expert opinion at this point, why do you think the U.S. is still in Syria?
Well, we still have a lot of interest. Number one, because we've invested a lot of money in Syria, and we've invested a lot of money into the mother rebels and these other organizations as well, and these supposed non-profit organizations that were apparently supporting humanitarian actions. But then every time we go onto a place and we realize that these donations and money and aid that was supposed to go into civilians, it always ended up in the hands of not just the rebels that are armed, but into Islamist groups. So what are we doing? We've been partnering with the Free Syrian Army at the beginning. That was swollen by al-Nusra and by Al-Qaeda, and was swollen by ISIS. And we kept on feeding and sending money and arming to the so-called now Free Syrian Army that our own Pentagon has declared in 2013 that was finished. There were no more moderate rebels or friendly to the United States in 2013, but yet still we kept on sending weapons. So then there is a change of foreign policy when President Trump comes into power, and he says, okay, we change our foreign policy. We want to end the war in Syria. We want to withdraw from Syria and let the Syrians decide what they want to do with the president. So our interest is obviously not only for the oil, which we were buying from ISIS.
So you're saying that the U.S. was buying oil from the Islamic State?
We found papers, and there are receipts from ISIS that they were selling oil, basically, to the United States and to all of NATO. So then you see what other interests we have as well. You know, on the end, we're not sending that many weapons anymore, but yes, guess what? We are buying the oil, and with the oil, with this money, they're buying the weapons. So every time a city is liberated, you go into the city that's been liberated, and you find the weapons, like serious weapons, missiles, and every kind of very advanced weaponry that is done in the United States and in Britain, in France, in Bulgaria. I'm talking about basically all of Europe, and chemical weapons in all the headquarters of terrorist groups. But yet, every chemical attack that happens, it's always blamed on the Syrian government. But all of a sudden, you know, what you find or where you find is always in areas of the terrorists.
Obama's out of power. President Trump is in power now. Since he has been in office, how has the situation changed for the Syrian people? Has it gotten better for everyday Syrians?
After 7 years of war and not really understanding or knowing that this was going to last such a long time, Trump made a change in the foreign policy when he decided to become president. And I remember when he finally declared publicly and they announced the policy change, which was not a regime change anymore, that they were willing to work with Bashar al-Assad and they will be willing to, you know, let the Syrian people decide what they wanted to be with what they wanted to do with the president. Trump really tried to follow sort of his instinct into Syria, and he kind of tried to do the best for the Syrian people.
Oh, a lot of people point to Aleppo and they say that Aleppo was liberated by the moderate rebels, and that when President Assad's forces came in and they took over the city, that they say Aleppo fell again to government forces. What's your response to that?
The whole thing about Aleppo is that it's in a very strategic point. You know, Aleppo was basically invaded by ISIS and taken, and they came from outside, you know, because a lot of the leaders of these big terrorist groups are foreigners. They are not Syrians. So they came into Syria, and they were coordinating and working with all of the Western countries and the potential, you know, powerful neighbor countries, which is Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey. So they needed to break Aleppo because it was the financial capital of Syria. So all the companies, industries, factories, like the big money was coming from Aleppo. So they thought that by breaking Aleppo and taking over Aleppo, it was going to be easier to pursue the regime change.
In your experience, how do the people of Syria feel about President Assad's soldiers, his army? How do they feel about the Syrian soldiers?
There is no discussion over the army. Everybody loves the army. And in reality, you know, the army is the people of Syria. These are children. I always say this, and you being in Syria, you're not gonna let me lie. These are 18, 19-year-old children that have been drafted, and the ones that are just volunteering. You see civilian engineers, you see mathematicians, you see professors that are volunteering to fight in order to liberate their cities from terrorism. This is not a civil war. This is the #1 lie that we have in our media. This is not a civil war. This is a war between the Syrian people and the extremism of terrorism.
Tell me about the white helmets. I really want to know about the white helmets because they make the headlines a lot. We just heard in March that President Trump suspended funding for them, but now we've learned that that funding has been reinstated at the tune of $6.6 million. So what can you tell me about the white helmets? Because I know that on this latest trip that you went there, you found a lot of things out about them.
People used to tell me, you know, as they were leaving, I was asking about the white helmets, and they will tell me like, no, they're not good people. They work terrorists, and they keep on saying terrorists. So when I went in East Aleppo, I recorded this video in their headquarters, and I found, you know, flags of Al-Qaeda, and I found that they were next door to the Al-Nusra headquarters. I found out
there were flags of ISIS and Al-Qaeda in the White Helmets headquarters.
There were stickers of ISIS in the walls of the headquarters of the White Helmets, and then there were flags of Al-Qaeda, of Al-Nusra, in the living room of the White Helmets downstairs.
Okay, so we know that the White Helmets are publicly, they have an anti-government position. They're not shy about saying that. So how do we know that the government didn't go in and put those stickers and stuff in after the fact to make them look bad?
Okay, so there is a movie that was done, I believe it was in 2014 or 2015 by Al Jazeera, and they made a documentary about the White Helmets, and it's in the headquarters of the White Helmets in Aleppo. And you actually can go, and through the film you can see the sticker of ISIS and you can see the flags of Al Qaeda in the background. Going a little bit deeper, I went into Zamalka. Zamalka is a city inside of Ghouta, and it's where is the largest headquarters of the White Helmets. You actually have the training center of the White Helmets, which it is the place where they are not just like, they actually truly train how to go up and down the stairs and how to pass through fire, etc. So these are 3 schools. Okay, so these 3 schools are basically taken by Al-Nusra. So this whole neighborhood, it is an Al-Nusra neighborhood that is closed where civilians were not able to come inside. Inside this Al-Nusra neighborhood, the compound of the families and the bosses, I'm talking the heads of Al-Nusra, they took the 3 schools, just like in Aleppo, that I have in my video. The 3 schools, the first one is the training center of the White Helmets. The second one is used like a court where they used to, talk to people and bring people. He's not praying, he's not doing this, he has to be, punished or get in prison, etc. And then you have the third one, which is the third school, which was the prison for Al-Nusra. So the training center of the White Helmets is beside these 2 buildings. And then you have the compound of the White Helmets. I asked the people that were around there, they had no idea who the White Helmets were because they're saying, wait a second, no, because we had no way to get inside. Then in Zamalka, you go 10 minutes away from the training center, okay? And then you find basically 4 big buildings. So now imagine this area here. You have 3 buildings that are the headquarters of the White Helmets. Next door to these 3 buildings is the headquarters of Faylaq al-Rahman. So Faylaq is another terrorist group that had links with the Free Syrian Army, but somehow had links as well with Al-Nusra that was sponsored by Turkey and by Qatar. And they're next door.
Okay, so when you say they're next door, you mean like a block over? You mean like 2 blocks over, like they're very close to each other? How close are you talking?
I mean that they share the same garage. So they park their cars in the same garage. They are like...
So the White Helmets and this terrorist group are parking their cars next to each other in the same garage?
Yes, in the same garage. And basically there are 10 steps. Let's talk about steps. You walk 10 steps, and 10 steps you're in the headquarters of the White Helmets.
So it would be...
10 steps you go to the headquarters of Faylaq.
Then it would be very difficult for anyone to say, well, the White Helmets couldn't have known the terrorists were there.
Exactly. So they make resolutions, like in the government, because they have their own law. So in their own law, they have these sort of, I don't know the word in English, but they're basically telling who is in charge of the killing and the massacre of the Syrian people when the confrontation among Faylaq...
Just keeping records, basically.
Exactly. But they are actual, like, legal papers that they put. And there are 2 times they name this American person that is protected, who was basically leading and commanding one of the battlefields, or maybe fronts of the terrorists. What are we doing there? Like, what is the name of an American person doing them? Why are they in an official paper, a legal paper of a terrorist group recorded? Why is it recorded into there? So, okay, maybe this gets a little bit, okay, it's too out of hand. Okay, it doesn't matter, but I found these sort of things. Now we know that Britain supports the White Helmets. They've been very open about it. So far, they have supported with 38.8 million pounds to the White Helmets. And I found the boots, hundreds and hundreds of boots that are made in Britain, and that actually the Army of Britain also uses in the headquarters of Faylaq. So let's say they gave it to the White Helmets and not to the terrorists, but that's what the Syrian people tell you. They are the same. white helmets work for the terrorist organizations.
You've given examples where the white helmets were next to terrorist buildings. Maybe that's just 2 examples. Are there any other cases where they're close together?
So this is, yes. So you have the headquarters of the white helmets, okay, that they are linked to a residential building where they supposedly were living or commuting or getting together, however, and you have this big tunnel that connects the headquarters of the white helmets with this residential building.
What else did you find?
Okay, we found also the trucks, the firefighter trucks of the real Syrian civil defense. And, you know, which is crazy. And then they put the logos. And how did I know they were the White Helmets headquarters? Because I found a bunch of evidence and stickers and, you know, the tanks of oxygen with their logo of the White Helmets. Also, it's very important to say that the jackets that are used by the White Helmets, you know, it's written in English in the back. It says White Helmets. Like, this is Guta. Like, why would you have a jacket in San Diego or in Los Angeles written in Arabic? You know,
well, it might be trendy over here, but over there it doesn't. Yeah, why would you have anything written in English?
These jackets were used for the films that come into us, so we can see, because they are branding them. Now, 200 meters away, it's a weapon factory.
So 200 meters from the White Helmets headquarters was a weapons factory.
It's a weapons factory, and this weapon factory, also it is 100 meters from a chemical lab, which is also 150 meters from the headquarters of the White Helmets.
So the White Helmets were in the middle of a chemical weapons factory and a weapons factory.
Exactly. So the chemical lab factory, it had also testings for animals, and we found poison. I actually had some on my skin because I was touching everything. And plenty of books about chemistry.
You were in 6 different cities in your most recent trip, and you talked to a lot of people about the White Helmets. You told me that no one had heard of the White Helmets, or most people had not heard of them. If they're there to help people as a humanitarian group, why had no one heard of any of them?
I asked the children, like, do you know who the White Helmets are? And they have no idea. And I asked, but look at the poster. You don't know who they are? And they don't know who they are. They have no idea who they are.
Why do you think they didn't know who these White Helmets were?
Number one, because all these neighborhoods where the White Helmets headquarters were are enclosed neighborhoods reserved only for terrorists. So I'm doing this specifically because it's exactly like this. So you have this neighborhood that is Al-Nusra, which is Al-Qaeda in Syria, or Faylaq al-Rahman, or Jaish al-Islam. So actual civilians that know who they are or that heard about them, they would ask them to please assist them and take care of them because they knew they had hospitals. And they will always deny. I have the testimony of a child who told me he was he's 12 years old, and he was telling me, I got very sick and my parents went and asked for help, and they will deny treatment to them. Not only that, the ones that know who they are, they always say they're terrorists.
So we know the White Helmets have their headquarters next to terrorist headquarters and weapons factories and stuff, but what are they actually doing to help the terrorists? Are they actually doing anything, or are they just working next to them? What do we know that they're doing to assist them?
Well, there is a war happening, so there's a lot of casualties. And most of the time, the confrontation is between the Syrian army and the terrorist groups. So the terrorist fighters and the militias, they need assistance as well, and medical assistance. So yes, they go in and they assist them and they save them. Also in the Sakba headquarters, there is 500 meters away from the headquarters of the White Helmets is the hospital. And there is where they attended the hospital, and there's where the child said that he was not being taken care of. So it's almost sort of like a little studio, right, where they film the stuff with their own families. They actually go maybe say for real some people, and then they put together this, they go to the hospital, then, you know, it's all around.
So we could say that the real benefit, the real work that the White Helmets are doing for the terrorists is creating propaganda for them.
Yeah, not only creating propaganda, because they create the propaganda for us. So it's sort of like this. Okay, so apparently Assad is advancing now in Ghouta. He's taking over Ghouta. Okay, what are we going to do? Okay, well, let's show the world how he is gassing his own people. So let's make a false flag. So who is on the ground where the terrorist groups are being attacked by the Syrian army is the White Helmets. So the White Helmets go and produce this film of a chemical attack done by the horrific actions of the government of Syria or the Syrian army. So then we see these videos in all of our media. So they produce this propaganda for us. So we keep on founding and assisting and arming the terrorist groups that we call mother rebels that are killing the Syrian people.
Okay. So you've got these White Helmets who are creating this propaganda. They're making claims like in Douma that there was this chemical attack. The OPCW, what is their role in all this? Because they're supposedly supposed to go in and confirm whether or not these attacks happened. In February, they investigated Sarakib, and they said that there was, in fact, a chemical attack there. But then they admitted that all of the evidence that they used was given to them by groups like the White Helmets and other jihadists. So can we trust anything that the OPCW says? What are they doing over there?
Person, the ones inviting the OPCW was the Syrian government and even Russia that invited them over there. You were there while the OPCW was there. Did you had difficult times going into Douma?
No, you walk right in.
You walk right in and you were free to talk to everybody.
Yeah.
I was free to go in and talk to everyone. So was Robert Fisk and other very important journalists. And we all found the same thing. But the OPCW couldn't get on time because they were stopped. But I have my information, and unfortunately I cannot reveal my source. They told me that they were not able to go into the site because they had no permission to go from the United Nations, from the western side. It wasn't the government of Syria stopping them to go, because what will they find out? They will find out the same thing that you and I found out. What else will they find out? That the laboratory of chemical weapons was actually 150 meters away from the headquarters of the White Helmets, because they will find out that the people in Tarma and the people in Sagbak still denounce the 2013 chemical attack that happened in Ghouta that was blaming to the government of Syria, and the special envoy of the United Nations, once was in the ground, found out that it was the terrorists and the rebels, the one who actually produced that terrorist attack.
So have the OPCW, have they found at any point any credible evidence showing that President Assad or his government have used chemicals against civilians?
Of course, they have plenty of evidence from the White Helmets. This is our problem. Our problem is that every single evidence that we have from any chemical attack comes from the White Helmets. Every single proof that has been given of the use of sarin gas to the OPCW was given by the White Helmets. The problem is that every no-fly zone ever indicted and obliged by the United Nations to the Syrian army, it's been by footage given by the White Helmets.
Is this really a religious war? I mean, that's kind of what it's been painted as, that the Islamic State is coming in. They want to create a caliphate in Syria and Iraq and the Levant. So is that really what's happening? Is this a religious war?
I don't want to turn this around, okay? But I want you to answer me one thing. Have you seen Syrians having a difference between religions inside of the places where you've been? Have you seen Syrians, whether they are whatever religion, hanging out? What is your perception about this?
Well, no. Where I was staying in Damascus, there was, right outside of my hotel, there was a Catholic church, and just on the next block, there was a mosque. And every day you would see Catholic priests walking by, and you would see Muslims walking past, and they'd wave at each other. And I mean, there was no conflict whatsoever.
I've been in Syria for 2 years. 2 years. Eating, hanging out with them, being with them, sharing with all of them. Syrian people love each other. And that's what they're fighting. They're fighting secularity. They're fighting an inclusive Syria. They're fighting for a Syria that will respect and protect minorities. And that is exactly what extreme groups don't want. This is a lie about You know, everybody goes and keeps on saying, oh, it's the Sunnis trying to protect themselves from the Shiites in Syria. How is it possible? Still until today, 60% of the army in Syria, the Assad army in Syria, are Sunnis. The majority of the population in Syria are Sunnis. So how are you telling me that this is a civil war or is a religious war? It's a lie. When you actually have Christians and Muslims protecting each other. I have so many interviews where a Muslim is telling me how he got his back burned because he was trying to defend the church where his best friend grew up. And he used to go to this church as well. They are protecting each other. They're protecting the right of the girl being able to cover and uncover themselves whenever they want. They're fighting that extremism. It's not a religious war among them. They are fighting the entrance of this Wahhabism or extremism of the Sharia law or any sort of philosophy that will put them as one type of race or one religion.
If Carla Ortiz or myself or other independent journalists can visit Syria and investigate these scenes, why can't the UN or OPCW weapons inspectors or any other Western governments do the same thing? Syria isn't impossible to reach. It's not on another planet. It's only a plane ride away. The Syrian government has invited the world to come and see what happened for themselves. Some have gone, but are being attacked for reporting what they found. So until other journalists and government representatives make the effort to see what's happening for themselves, we've provided you with first-hand information, videos, interviews, and eyewitness stories so you don't have to listen to someone tell you what to think. You can decide for yourself.